video number 2, carrying on reviewing this book here, Keep Clear, My Adventures with Asperger's by Tom Cutler. Another thing that I could relate to was that on page 41 to page 42, he explains how he often gets in a muddle with automatic barriers, card payment gadgets and ticket machines, like, the ones you get at stations and things like that. He cannot block out the irrelevant info and finds himself concentrating on all of it. And imagining instructions cause anxiety. And he becomes enraged. I can relate to that. I've experienced that often at stations, particularly when there's a queue building up behind you and you have to process really quickly, and particularly if you've got slow processing speed. And when you're under stress, that can obviously make your processing speed even slower. That can be really anxiety provoking, so I could definitely relate to that because that's happened to me before. So yeah, and then he discusses his diagnosis, because as I say, he got diagnosed after the episode where he had that panic attack when everything came to a head. Another interesting thing I found interesting is that on page 58, he describes how he had taken a personality test to try and find out more about himself. I've taken tons of personality tests myself. I'm very interested in personality, I guess, because you want to discover who you are and and it can help you to sort of work out who you are, I guess. So he takes his personality test, which tells him that he's the rare type for masterminds. Sounds a little bit like me too. Masterminds are concrete thinkers, introspective, logical, strong-willed, aim for high quality. Single-minded concentration on own ideas can cause them to ignore people's feelings. So yeah, I can relate to that. It sounded very much like me. I think I'm probably a mastermind as well. Another one of his special interests, I think, are road signs, is Sherlock Holmes. And he says that he reckons Sherlock Holmes might have been autistic, a fictional character, Sherlock Holmes, because he's very quirky and he reminds him of him. For example, Sherlock had a number of special interests. He was an obsessive expert in practical chemistry, newspaper typography, different kinds of London mud, very solitary, very keen on cleanliness, and had a weird sense of humour. And he says that the Sherlock Holmes stories are sprinkled with Asperger's types, which is quite interesting. He also speculates about a number of historical figures, whether or not they might have been autistic. That makes sometimes quite interesting reading, where I do think you have to be careful, because obviously we don't know, because they're dead now, and I think there are dangers connected with retro-diagnosing people. Because some of them might have just been eccentric, and obviously just being eccentric doesn't mean that someone is autistic, because I think that autism is more than eccentricity. It's quite a serious disability. Well, it is for me anyway. Obviously everyone's different and you might disagree, but because it affects everyone differently. But I think it's, in many cases, it's not just pure eccentricity, so I do think they do have to be careful. But it is it's interesting to speculate though, and I do think it's quite interesting to read about historical figures, even if they're not autistic. They might share some traits that you can relate to, because, they might not be autistic, but they might share some of these traits that, you can think, yes, a kindred spirit. So it's still quite interesting anyway, even if they're not autistic. One thing that Tom Cutler isn't, as I say, he's stereotypical in some respects, but he's not good at maths, because that's one of the stereotypes, isn't it? Particularly for people with Asperger's, people often assume that we're really good at numbers and things like that. Personally, I have dyscalculia, which is like a specific maths learning difficulty. I really, really struggled with that, and I still do, particularly when I was at school, and it's one of the things the teachers picked up very early on, no number sense whatsoever, and I was put back on I needed lots of teaching assistant input on maths and things. So no, I'm not good at maths at all. And Tom Cutler also finds numbers tricky. I'm not sure if he's got dyscalculia like I have, but he finds numbers tricky and maths very difficult. But that's balanced, he says, by his knack for words. So that's an example of the uneven skill development. So he has a similar skill profile to me, which is quite interesting. He talks about masking quite a lot, the constant self-monitoring, having to think how to walk after losing this instinctive ability. I thought that was quite a good way of putting it, because it is very conscious. So yeah, if you think walking for most of us is automatic, but if you lost that ability, you'd have to think about it consciously, maybe a bit like someone who's had a stroke, and then they have to consciously learn how to walk again. Masking is the psychological equivalent of that. So I thought that's quite an interesting analogy. On page 84, another interesting analogy, he says that typical people are said to be like cooked spaghetti, soft and all mixed together, while AS are more like uncooked spaghetti. If you try to bend them, they snap. Which I thought was interesting. Well, I like food, so it's a nice food-based analogy, that one. He's never been good in groups, neither have I. Beyond 2 or 3 people, he feels frightened, alone and angry, and I can really relate to that. He mentions the Hollywood actor Anthony Tony Hopkins, who is autistic, like he's actually had a proper diagnosis, it's not just conjecture. I didn't actually realise Anthony Tony Hopkins is autistic, so that was interesting. Anthony Hopkins says that he was a poor learner, which left him open to ridicule and gave him an inferiority complex. He grew up absolutely convinced that he was stupid. And he was diagnosed in his 70s with AS. But his struggles not immediately apparent under the gloss of normality and professional success. He was a very isolated child, did not have many friends, and was very much a loner, and he failed to shine academically, so he sought refuge in painting, and he was a good pianist. He portrayed the killer Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, which I have seen, a good film, but I had no idea he was autistic, so that was all new. And one thing I disagreed with was that Tom Cutler does very much side with Simon Baron-Cohen. The idea, I won't go into this now because that'll take a whole other video, but the idea that boys are better at single-mindedness and systems, so-called typically male skills, and the extreme male brain theory of autism. He agrees with Simon Baron-Cohen. Personally, I think it's actually a load of sexist twaddle. That the reason more women are nursery school teachers is because they're intrinsically better at empathy. I think that it's a lot more complicated than that, and I think that society has a big role to play in the way we're socialised. But I'm not going to go into it now, but I very much disagree with that extreme male brain thing. I think it's just way too simple. So he criticises psychologist Professor Cordelia Fine, who's a member of the Neurogenderings Network, which is a group of neurofeminist scholars. Fine thinks that Baron-Cohen is guilty of neurosexism. I happen to agree with that. I do think it's neurosexism. But Tom Cutler says, if Fine doesn't believe that women are self-evidently more sociable than men, I think she should get out more. A little bit harsh if you ask me. But I just think it's more complex. And I'm not going to go into it now because that'll take a whole other video and I don't have time to talk about it here. All I can say is I do disagree with Tom on that one. So no, I 100% disagree that women are intrinsically more social than men. And I disagree with the extreme male brain theory. I'll leave it at that for now, but yeah, we part ways there. He says that autistics intrinsically prefer systems such as languages, medicine, politics, and philosophy and stuff like that. But that might be true, but it left me thinking that surely stereotypically feminine subjects, like things like psychology, also involve systems. So, you know what I mean? Because it's like, what about like childcare? Isn't that a system? Like you could think of anything could be a system. So this whole idea that men are intrinsically better systems, you know, even for things that we think of as stereotypically female, like say looking after children or things like psychology and stuff like that, they're systems as well, aren't they not? So I don't know. So he also argues, based on very flimsy evidence, that Tony Benn showed Asperger's traits. I happen to actually have met Tony Benn. He was a Labour politician, he's dead now. I actually once met him at a meeting I went to when I was really into politics. There's a special interest, I won't talk about it now, but I did have a really strong special interest in politics at one point, and I did actually meet him at one point. I don't think he's got Asperger's personally. Yeah, he is a little bit eccentric, but, you know, many people are. I think it's a little bit far-fetched to think that he had Asperger's, even though it's interesting to kind of like look at his life and stuff. But yeah, I just think that's a bit far-fetched if you ask me. It's more likely that someone like Wittgenstein was autistic. That I definitely think there's a strong case for. We don't know for certain, but he definitely had lots and lots of traits, the philosopher Wittgenstein. So that seems more potentially more plausible. Another thing that I can relate to is that Tom studied English for A-level, but he struggled with literary metaphors. For example, that the fog described at the beginning of Bleak House is a metaphor for law, and he was the only one in his class not to have grasped this. I can relate as well. I did English for A-level as well, and I really struggled with the metaphors. My dad, who was an English teacher, had to help me a lot, so I could definitely relate to that. And he says how, you know, he's not much of a novel reader. Neither am I, although I have to try to read more fiction as an adult just to force myself to read it, because I do enjoy it once I understand it, but it just takes me a long time to understand it. But certainly when I was younger, I read more fact than fiction. I did read some fiction, but I had struggled quite a lot with comprehension, so it's quite difficult. So yeah, as I say, he mentioned Wittgenstein. I won't go into it now, but Wittgenstein definitely had quite a few traits, so it's very possible he was, or something similar. He was very unsociable, he had few friends, he was, you know, perfectionist. Yeah, it's possible he was, but we don't know for certain. And So yeah, where was it? So yeah, he talks about his wife is a complete opposite to him. She's the least autistic person he knows, and she helps him in social meetups. And he suggests that the best partners for Asperger's people seem to be either people like them, similar needs, or stark complementary opposites. And I agree with that, but I personally think that the opposites are probably best for me. I've never been in a relationship, but I do find it quite hard. I do think that I get on best with people who are like very, very like at the other extreme, so like really, really understanding. So yeah, I can understand where he's coming from there. So just go on. I won't have time to go through all of this, but he also mentions how the extensive vocabulary that many people with Asperger's have can mask real underlying problems. So what you do not see, because it's camouflaged, is the confusion, the self-monitoring, the anxiety, the muffed relationships, and the loneliness. I could definitely relate to that, and I definitely don't think that Asperger's type autism is mild at all. For many people, it can be very severe. So just moving on now. So I'll say the final verdict. I'll say it's generally a good book, although I felt it was a bit long and it could have been shorter and more concise. I disagreed with Tom's unquestioning support of Simon Baron-Cohen, the extreme male brain theory. There were parts I could relate to, but also many differences. Tom has led a full working life, he's had relationships, he's more integrated than I am. However, despite subtle appearances, underneath he has experienced extreme anxiety and turmoil, which I can relate to. And like me, he loves words and languages. And languages is a relative strength for Tom, as it is for many people with what used to be called Asperger's. Okay, so so it's worth a look at anyway, but it is quite a lengthy read, but an interesting account of just one person's life with Asperger's autism. Okay, so do leave in the comments box below. I'll be interested to hear what you think about this, and do please hit that notification bell. Do please subscribe if you haven't done already, and do please like this video if you like this what I've just talked about and you want to hear or see similar videos. So thank you for watching.